the last two applications I mentioned. Now, in regard to the City of Goleta's application, I would just like to note that we worked for several years with the city to resolve issues that were related to that project. Over the course of that work, the city made significant modifications, including changing the project to delete one of the originally two proposed bridges in order to reduce the potential impacts of the project while still providing for the necessary infrastructure improvements, incorporating substantial habitat restoration and public access and recreational opportunities into the project as well. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the city staff for working with our staff so diligently for so long to resolve those issues. And in regard to the second item, the Getachew application, I would note that although it is unusual for the Commission to allow for the deletion of a previously required condition of approval, such as a public view corridor condition, in this case, staff believes this is appropriate due to the unique circumstances, and specifically, although this site was located between Pacific Coast Highway and the ocean and had a view corridor condition in 1976, over the intervening years, there were a number of surrounding lots. There were about 8 lots located between Pacific Coast Highway and the beach. Those other lots were all developed with other residential permits, and given the nature of the topography, the vegetation on site, and the other development that was approved without that view corridor condition, there simply are no views available over these sites today, and that is what is driving our recommendation and why we think this is appropriate. I would just note in closing, the applicants are in agreement with all conditions of approval. We're not aware of any opposition, and staff therefore recommends the Commission vote and approve this item.
Thank you. Are there any ex partes?
Public comment.
Excuse me, sir, you're out of order. Are there any ex partes? We have one speaker card from John Davis with respect to these matters. Sir, you may come forward at this time.
Thank you very much. In regard to 17A, special condition number 3 is important in that it advances the principles enshrined in the California Coastal Act. Views are an important resource and have slowly but surely disappeared, replaced by walls and structures and other view obstructing objects. These views are protected not only by the California Coastal Act, but by the U.S. Coastal Zone Management Act of 1972, which the State Act implements. To deny this permit is to protect the coast and its valuable resources, and to approve it would sacrifice the very resources this Commission is tasked with protecting for only a private benefit. Furthermore, to extinguish such a deed restriction that is protective of views for whatever reason sets the stage for future requests to extinguish even more of the very few view corridors we have left of the valuable resources of the state. So think about it from the point of setting a precedent and having a line behind me come to you and say, well, you gave it to them. We want ours extinguished. We want ours extinguished until you have no view corridors left. Now, your staff was downplaying the value of view corridors, saying, well, everyone else is doing it, therefore let them do it too. It's really of no value. It is of value. That's why the commission that was here before you set forth this deed restriction. So take seriously the commissioners that have preceded you and their actions, and take seriously why they took those actions and why they stood up to protect the California Coastal Act and the Federal Coastal Zone Management Act, because the view corridor is a resource. There is no excuse to remove it now, and there was no excuse to remove it then, and there's no excuse to remove it 25 years from now. We have very few view opportunities left. They're being extinguished in a rapid manner, and in fact, in my area, in Los Angeles, in the Biona wetlands, they're proposing to put dikes along Highway 1 that are 30 feet tall, so you can't even see the ocean anymore. This is what we're talking about. So if you want to set a precedent that is contrary to your vows to uphold the Coastal Act, and you extinguish this, it will be running contrary to what your sworn oath to protect the laws of this state, and you all swore such an oath. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Turning it back over to staff.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
For rebuttal, or should we go ahead and have a motion?
I'd just like to make two very brief comments. One is just to note Mr. Davis's comment that staff has downplayed the importance of these easements. In fact, staff believes these easements in general are extremely important up and down the coast. But in this case, we have come to the conclusion that this is not a precedent. It's an extremely unique situation that we've looked at very closely. We are, of course, available for, I'll conclude my comments, but note that we are prepared to provide a full presentation on this if the Commission desires or to answer additional questions. But we do believe that in this unique case, there is no precedent or issues in this involved in deleting this special condition.
Thank you. Prior to calling for a motion, are there 3 or more commissioners desiring to take any of the matters off the consent calendar today? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Move consent.
Would either of you like to speak to your motion? Is there any unwillingness for unanimous concurrence on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we do concur. How much time do you think that you'll need? You have 3 speakers seating time to you.
Right.
That's
I
what
just
you'll
have a video that I want to start with, so you needn't call all of them up as long as you have the names. That's terrific, and we can start with the video.
Great, thank you.
Okay? At 234. This is a from NBC's Burning Questions. It's a Peabody Award investigative series regarding the Biono wetlands area and Playa Vista, the oil field gas issues, as well as conflict of interest. As soon as
Endres says a much larger quantity of gas is seeping into an old riverbed deep under Playa Vista and leaking upwards.
The gas spreads out into a large geographic area.
When the developers first began planning for all of this, Playa Vista, back in the early 1990s, the city commissioned an impact study which acknowledged the presence of flammable methane and toxic BTEX chemicals. But within certain guidelines, it proclaimed the site safe for development.
the 1993 EIR stated there were no shallow zones or pockets of gas that could seep to the surface under the Playa Vista site. None. No gas.
Well, game over.
Game over.
But McPherson and Endres began noticing signs of widespread gas migration. Bubbles in Centinela Creek, which they say tested positive for gas. Bubbles in boat slips in Marina del Rey, which flared when ignited. They also discovered early studies commissioned by the developers, indicating dangerous levels of hydrogen sulfide at the site and widespread gas contamination.
Which was proof positive that they had found oil field gas surfacing all across the Playa Vista site.
Early engineering studies by the city described Playa Vista as, quote, a high-risk area and confirmed hydrogen sulfide and BTEX gases at the site and methane concentrations.
Levels of methane gas that could be explosive.
One state agency became concerned.
Some of the BTEX chemicals are cancer-causing chemicals, known human carcinogens.
Another state agency is accused of looking the other way, at least in the beginning.
It was made clear to me when I joined the PUC that the development was going to happen and that no state agency should stand in the way. It was very clear that the biggest Democratic donors in town were behind that development deal. From my perspective, there was a whole atmosphere of, we don't want to see anything.
In the year 2000, Playa Vista developers spent more money lobbying the city than almost any other company. They also passed out publicity flyers saying there was, quote, little methane at the site. The next year, a city reviewer gave the project a green light.
The city really was not looking at the key health issues that were involved here.
The city said the SoCalGas underground storage facility, quote, is not the source of methane contamination found at the site, a point repeatedly emphasized by Playa Vista and SoCalGas. The report also shrank the methane concentrations and declared the risk from hydrogen sulfide and BTEX to be, quote, insignificant, with no further investigation warranted. Not everybody was convinced.
There was information that we were not provided.
The state's Department of Toxic Substances Control called the city report, quote, incomplete, and faulted participating engineers for running gas tests in clean soil that had been brought in to cover the contamination.
That would obviously not result in an accurate reading.
Walter Merschott, an engineer who took part in the testing, confirms in writing that it was often done in newly laid cover soil known as surcharge, which he says conceals gases and results in inaccurate, lower or non-detectable readings of methane, hydrogen sulfide, and BTEX.
I don't think we were getting correct answers.
As construction continued, the city instructed developers and homeowners to install safety systems to keep the gas in check. But now, with the project half complete, Endres and McPherson have uncovered what they see as evidence that some safety measures are not working.
They've had problems with them, yes.
In fact, a city expert has warned the city council that a series of experimental 50-foot vent wells designed to siphon off gas in the most dangerous high methane areas may not be effective.
A deep vent well will not work properly where you have high water table or you have a soil, clay soils or clay sands, which could clog up the deep vent well.
Fire department documents dating from the past year show few gas alarms going off inside the buildings, but
Billy,
various
excuse me,
breakdowns in gas monitoring systems,
now,
especially at the Fountain Park Apartments.
And load the PowerPoint that I've created, please. I draw your attention to this because the discussion up there about the studies being done in clean soil, a lot of the problems that were done with the studies were done by Camp Dresser McKee. Camp Dresser McKee was before you in December on behalf of the Fish and Game Department and Playa Capital, who spoke with regard to the drains that the CDP was issued for with the illegal drains that are on the Ballona wetlands. These are issues you saw the former head of the California Public Utilities Commission, Loretta Lynch, discussing the fact that agencies were told to look the other way on behalf of the Playa Vista site. These are issues of conflict of interest that are very real. I wanted you to hear this from other people that are agency people. The people that have done the DEIRS for the Ballona area are all consultants of either SoCalGas and or Playa Capital. And as you saw in December, the people that came before you were SOMAs that had inserted those illegal drains in the first place, and Camp Dresser and McKee, who basically stated that, again, I was wrong, there's no gas out there. But what they didn't provide you, and what Fish and Game didn't take, which this staff actually had, that I had provided them, were studies, even CDM's own studies, where they found hydrogen sulfide in higher levels of gas, which they claimed they didn't have in December. But moving on from there, I do want to thank all of you for the vote asking for the 30-day capping and to disallow any 5-year wait in removal of those drains. I thank you very much for not catering to a sister agency and acting as an agency that will do its enforcement job. To that end, that CDP came out as a 30-day capping. I cannot, with 3 to 4 months, get a response from Fish and Game through a Public Record Act request as to what is going on there. Because they've stated ahead of time that I will not receive this information until then. So at this point in time, and I've asked staff from the Coastal Commission what has gone on there, and I've also not received any response. The drains appear to have been capped with some sort of material that you would, caulking that like you would use in your bathroom, which very likely works, but I would like to have all of the information with regard to what was done, all of the information with regard to the removal of those drains, because Director Ainsworth in the CDP stated that they could be then allowed another beyond 5 years or beyond to remove the drains. So we don't have the actual findings from that hearing, which is of great concern to Grassroots Coalition. Similarly, with CDP 5-91-463, which backs us up to the settlement agreement with the Coastal Commission and the Friends of Iona, this is a CDP that needs to be updated. There was a contingency CDP similar to this situation that showed that once it's capped for here, then you have to do that. Well, in CDP 463, first they had to do the catch basin, and then they had to finish off the flood control. Well, the flood control was never finished off, and it was dropped when the state bought the property. But there's been no updating from staff to fill in the gaps as to what happened. And there has been no filling in of the gaps as to what has happened since the settlement agreement with the Friends of Iona that occurred in 1990, which was years before the city ever even gave any coastal development permit for projects out there, including the catch basin, which is Playa Vista's flood control, which, if you look at the picture that's in front of you, that's Playa Vista's first vision of Iona. That's what was in the settlement agreement. And as you can see, what is green there includes the catch basin area, and it includes the area to the left of that, which was to be dug out. And if you look to the north, which is Area A, it is also an area that was dug out. Very similar to what they're trying to do in the DEIR now, dig it out. These are the issues why we want to go back to the settlement agreement and have this all straightened out. And by the way, just so I can make clear, Grassroots Coalition, and I'm also executive member of the Airport Marina Group, Sierra Club, there was a recent tour given. I just want to make it clear, while I appreciate people coming and talking, Grassroots was not invited to that, and neither was the Airport Marina Group or the Sierra Club. So to be clear, so that I hopefully will not see in the future that all of the groups that would like to see Iona dug out were discussed and talked to. That is definitely not the case. Next slide. This is again from Exploration Technologies. In that folder that I provided you, you have all of these slides and you have the full letter. That portion that I've highlighted discusses the pump and treat that's needed to even make sure that these systems work. That pump and treat is what I talked to you about in December. Playa Vista has to get rid of its groundwater. One of the open investigations with staff that I have is the removal of water from Playa Vista. Not only were they removing the drains, but they are taking away, pumping and diverting all of the groundwaters. Next slide, please, of the Iona wetlands. I need to get to the it is the slide that you have in your book of the aquifers. Next slide, please. Not that one. That one. All right. Here are the aquifers. These are the freshwater aquifers underneath Iona. As you can see, to the left there is the salt water. None of these waters have been, and I'm listening to the Army Corps saying today that they are going to pay attention to things, but in Iona's situation in the DEIRS, which they are a part, they were taken off the job, so to speak, and we have no hydrology studies. There has been no investigation as to how to protect those fresh waters that are underneath Iona. Next slide also is another one. Those are all the freshwater aquifers. Those waters are classified as freshwater drinking water. And none of that has been attended to in the DEIR EIS. I do appreciate staff's preliminary comments where they have stated that the oil field gas issues have not been addressed independently, and in fact they have not. SoCalGas is the only one that has made comment regarding their own gases at this site, and that needs to change. And that is also of concern because here with Ringe Dam, you have the Corps saying that all this evaluation will happen. Well, it hasn't. We have a DEIR EIS out, and those evaluations haven't happened for Iona, and they need to happen. And we would like all of your assistance in making that happen, and I will send you the information that's also in your packet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm waiting for the PowerPoint to be pulled up. This commission is no different in looking the other way on Coastal Development Permit 5-91463. In fact, the staff issued a coastal development permit without a vote of the California Coastal Commission, and falsified roll call was provided. The Coastal Commission staff is actively concealing this important information from the Coastal Commission regarding 591-463. The date of hearing was scheduled for May 12, 1992. Please remember this date. Records responsive to a CPRA prove that the Coastal Commission staff issued a coastal development permit without a vote by this commission and without a public hearing. There are no transcripts available, but the hearing audio tape was provided. It proves the commission did not vote to approve the permit on the 12th, and the tape says the hearing was trailed to the next day, the 13th, and it was not. The audio tapes prove that. The application was received on March 23, 1992. Prior to the hearing on May 12th, a roll call was submitted by an unknown party to the staff, date stamped April 8th, more than a full month before the hearing. It says, as modified by staff. This is the record of vote that the staff presented to me in the CPRA. The hearing was scheduled for May 12th. The coastal development permit was issued on August 7th, 1992, and says the vote was on April 8th, 1992. It also says the findings were adopted on September 16th, 1992. There was no hearing on April 8th. The adopted findings issued on September 16, 1992 say the hearing was on May 12th, contradicting the permit which says the vote was on April 8th. The audio tape of the May 12th hearing indicates the information required for the commission to vote is missing. Executive Director Peter Douglas encouraged the commission to vote anyway and to sort it out later. Staff counsel Ralph Faust objected. Peter Douglas said, "I'll get the names," probably referring to the names you just saw in the falsified roll call, "and we will trail this till tomorrow." There was no hearing on the next day, May 13th, according to the May 13th audio record, and there was no hearing. The permit was issued by staff without a hearing, without a vote by the Coastal Commission, and using a falsified roll call submitted by an unknown party, date stamped in a month before the hearing occurred. Therefore, this permit is void. And here is the audio tape of that hearing, and you can hear for yourself that this is not a fallacy. It's the truth. This commission staff issued a permit contrary to the due process of law, which requires this commission to take a vote and do this. Now remember, the following hearing, we have the audio tapes of that from PRA. It was not trailed to the next day. No vote was taken. Therefore, this permit is void. Here's the audio tape. Could you turn it up, please? Okay, got a little volume issue here, but this works too.
Yes, and item 13.
Vice findings are adopted.
13B. Yes, and item 13B is the revised findings for the McGuire-Thomas amendment, and these set of findings reflect the Commission's action to approve the amendment. There is a handout from the applicant's representative in which they suggest 4 relatively minor corrections to the revised findings. We've reviewed that handout, and we agree that those corrections should be made to reflect your action and incorporate those into our staff recommendation. That concludes my comments.
Do you have the prevailing side on that, Chuck? I didn't bring any records on it.
I wasn't here at the hearing either.
Teresa probably brought one. We're going to have to probably continue this, Mr. Chairman, because they don't have the prevailing side.
Tell you what, why don't you all vote for it, and then we'll sort it out later. We'll sort it out.
I'm going to tell Mr. Faust Mr. Faust is having a stroke.
Well, all right. We'll have to call San Francisco.
I'll get the names and we'll trail this till
We
tomorrow.
anticipate interrogatories if we do this.
Yes. No, and then maybe depositions. So we'll trail this and get the names for you for tomorrow.
Okay. I think that takes us to 15.
That's the end of the
Okay.
tape, and you can stop the
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
audio.
item 15.
So we have the hearing audio tapes from the following day, the 13th. No vote was taken. The Coastal Commission issued a permit. The staff issued a permit anyway, and usurped this commission's authority and overstepped and defrauded the entire state and the United States in this respect. This is deplorable, and this will be addressed again in the context of the Coastal Development Permit 591-463. It may end up, who knows, it may end up in litigation again, and you will hear about it, and you need to do something to fix this, because this is the permit they're trying to finish with the Ballona Wetlands restoration to complete the flood control project predicated on this permit. Thank you.
And you could submit that, the additional comments to Ms. Miller for the record. But had a question for staff. During public comment, some extremely serious allegations were alleged with respect to an item and a vote in 1992 in the Ballona area involving an alleged falsified roll call vote. And do you have some additional information to provide us? It's very serious allegations, and I think we have to address whatever that is.
No, I don't have any knowledge of what went on there, and I would encourage Mr. Davis to submit any evidence he has, and we can look into it, certainly. From what I heard, though, it sounded like a revised findings hearing that was postponed, and that the permit was approved, but the revised findings needed to be acted on. So I just want to remind the commission that we don't have to have revised findings to issue a CDP. But we can certainly look into those allegations.
Thank you for that clarification. That certainly helps. And if the public speaker could submit something in writing, I'm sure that our staff, as they have indicated, will look into that. Thank you. Next, we'll have Jody Usek. And followed by Leah Memzik, and then followed by, appears to be Elizabeth Clay.
Hi, it looks like we lost a few commissioners, maybe? I don't know. Anyhow, thank you very much, commissioners. I appreciate your time and attention. My name is Jody Gusick, and I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm here to tell you my story of moving to Venice to build a beautiful home and create a family and a life for myself there. So let me see, take a deep breath. I moved to Venice in 1998. I'm a market research professional. I love art and architecture. It's my side passion. In 2001, I fell in love with a man who also lived in Venice with the same dream of designing and building a home and raising a family. In early 2004, this story goes way back, but it continues for many others. In early 2004, we purchased a lot in the walk streets that had a very small tear-down house on it. The floors were so termite infested you could see the dirt beneath them. We got busy, very excited, designing our home with an architect. We were happy and excited to finally be realizing our dream. We were engaged at that time and we submitted our plans to the city. They approved them without any issue. They praised us, in fact, for our thoughtful design as it was fully Venice specific plan compliant. And it complied with all the building codes at that time. However, to our astonishment and shock, we were notified that the city's approval of our plans had been appealed by someone in the neighborhood. The appeal was filed only one day before the appeal period was to end. I remember our shock and panic. We were to be married in just a couple of weeks. Now we had to cancel our wedding, figure out what to do to defend our house. We found out that a woman we had been living next door to, who we had been friendly with on our current street, had been quietly organizing against us. She and 3 other households on what was to be our new street were doing all they could to stop us. We were stunned, blindsided. I started having panic attacks and nightmares as this small group were doing everything they could to pressure us and to stop us from continuing. They lied to others about us. They told other people that we were developers from Palm Springs. We had both lived in Venice for nearly 10 years. They held up our permits for nearly a year and a half. This cost us not only over $150,000 in carrying costs and legal fees, it cost us our wedding, it cost us our honeymoon. Our first year and a half of marriage was consumed by public hearings like this. I've been before the Coastal Commission before, as well as court appearances. I had to file a temporary restraining order because we were being harassed. It cost us our peace of mind, our comfort in our neighborhood where we'd lived for years. And it came at not only huge financial costs, but emotional and health costs as well. I developed TMJ. My husband developed a heart condition. He ended up having a heart attack at age 52. He's still alive, thank goodness, but we are no longer married. Although we ultimately won our right to build our home, the legal fees and carrying costs during that delay put us so much into debt that even though we had succeeded in building our dream home, we had to sell it because we had to dig out of our debts. So although I was scared to come here today, I come here to tell you this story because it's just one of many, many stories like mine that I've seen go on over these past 20 years that I've lived in Venice. The toxic bullying and intimidation that occurs to homeowners like myself has to stop. I've seen many, many other people harassed and intimidated for fences, for trying to remodel, for modest remodels, for new construction, everything in between. In fact, they bullied my husband not just once, but twice. Years after we sold that first house, we gathered our resources and tried again. And this time we lost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leah Memzik. While you get set up, maybe we'll call up. Are you ready, or should we call up another person?
Ready. Thank
All
you.
right.
I have a little presentation for you, and then I'll speak afterwards.
Thank you.
Oh, I have 6 minutes. George Abrahams is with me.
You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. I get my 6 minutes. Thank you so much.
In a state that's really working. We are a state of laws, and we want to observe the law. Everyone's entitled to accurate information.
However, California has not been working, as it does not obey the laws and it does not provide accurate information, and it allows select insiders to evade compliance with the laws and to provide misleading, false, and fraudulent information.
City Council members, my name is Leah Renee Memzik, and I'd like to bring to your attention once again a complaint regarding public officials' corrupt alteration of written laws.
The City of Los Angeles corruptly removed the quality from its written laws. No pun intended. They really did. They got rid of the word quality, like from the California Environmental Quality Act. And of all places, they got rid of it in the coastal zone of the City of Los Angeles.
LAMC 12.20.2G1F was written, published, and states, any other finding or finding as may be required for the development by the California Environmental Quality Act. However, public officials have corruptly altered it. I brought it to your attention on October 20th and many other times. I'm delivering you the document again, once again today. It's not an error because you know and failed to correct. And there's harm and there's a benefit to the city. Because see, if the city doesn't tell anybody, the city doesn't have to submit their own city environmental records. So that's fraud, once again. Please correct. I instruct you per the California Constitution to correct.
Thank you, Ms. Renee. Julius, public comment.
Harms to the Pacific Palisades coastal bluffs include broken sanitary sewers,
Right there. So that's just going right into the earth.
broken storm drains,
The sewers and storm drains are leaking.
and a moving coastal bluff that the city refuses to notify the people.
They are apparently installing a motion sensing device to detect earth movement in this area of slide. About 25 years ago, the hillside moved.
More harms include unpermitted development and construction of new structures on a coastal bluff in the Bel Air Bay area of the city of Los Angeles. See violation V512039. On March 7th, 2018, and on previous occasions, I delivered the coastal bluff map and the location of 283 Trina Way to each of the coastal commissioners. I also pointed out in the March 7th hearing how McPherson of 283 Trina Way uses false and fraudulent and inaccurate information.
For example, McPherson uses assessor number 003 for his street widening, but for his new development, he uses 011. So he has two assessor numbers. Major fraud, and you're allowing it.
So I brought you today the deleted assessor number ending in 003. It was deleted on April 3rd, 2015. And then he got a new one. This is Scott McPherson, director of McPherson Oil. He got a new assessor number activated on April 3rd, 2015. Why is that harmful? Because last month he put in his whole housing plan. How did he submit and have it recorded? Now that's big felony. A big felony. Who approved it? Who approved it? I'm still waiting for the coastal development permit hearing because I appealed it and it's scheduled for April 21st. So I ask you guys if you can make sure you write a letter and say he has to have a coastal development permit. Here's a letter on 6 months after the fact. He's still using the false and fraudulent assessor number. What are they covering up? What are they covering up? This is a storm drain. Do you see the white? Do you see the white? There's the white. 40 feet of it wasn't there. That's the storm drain right in front, downslope from my property and right in front of McPherson. And by the way, that white is holes. I put my hand through it. See a little hand? That's the pipe. 40 feet of it was non-existent. So I guess that's why the hill's going down. Let's see what else isn't legal. It's not legal to build on a bluff. You can see on your categorical exclusion, which, by the way, when I went to get the map yesterday, your staff denied it. They denied my ability to see 283 Trina Way records. And if you can see on the middle of page 5, it says not included, not part of this exclusion are the first row of bluff and canyon lots. So it doesn't matter that. One more thing, his certificate of trust is an oil company. It's an oil lease. And your categorical exclusion says no oil drilling. I did bring it up to Jack. He says, well, they'll never drill for oil. But if they cause that landslide with that pipe, and you know it, here's the map. And by the way, here's his application. There's no permit number. And
Let me show you this. Here's the, and I'll keep it all for you. 5 years, nobody's come up to me and asked me to see my evidence. Not one person. By the way, I went to the FBI to file a complaint about it. They didn't want to even see the evidence. Do you want to know what the FBI, I don't want to talk about it, but the FBI told me, I just have to tell you real quick. They told me murder's not a crime. So I've been living with the terror of an FBI special agent saying murder's not a crime. Let me tell you, I walked out of there, talked to one of the attorneys. I said, murder's not a crime? He goes, oh, yes, it's a crime.
Thank you, Ms. Renee. Thank you.
Here's your map. If you could come up to me afterwards, and I'll present all the evidence to you so you know. And if you could please write a letter directing them in the appeal hearing, which is scheduled for March 21st. I did appeal it. Could you please write a letter that he has to uphold, needs a coastal development permit, if it's even legally possible to obtain. Thank you very much.
Elizabeth Clay, followed by Barry Casserly, and the last speaker card I have is Dario Dodman Alvarez.
I'm getting seated a minute by Dario, so that's 4 minutes.
Hard
to follow
you'll
that.
Have 4 minutes.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Clay. I'm going to talk to you about my role as a Venice resident and some perceptions that I have. The congestion in the West Side is in large part driven by the fact that thousands of workers arrive and leave city neighborhood centers every day. Venice is no exception to this problem. People and talent are attracted to economic opportunities, and Venice has plenty of business opportunity, especially as we scale to accommodate the well-known growth of IT tech facilities. One misnomer is that individuals who work for these companies are all being paid salaries that are conducive to the cost of living. This is often not the case, and even hardworking urban professionals can feel poor in the face of Venice's exorbitant cost of housing. A prior owner of a mortgage facility, I'm well aware that the median income of most households is insufficient to cover a normal-sized mortgage payment when a single-family home starts at a value of $1.5 million and goes up. That said, a dual-income household with a legal accessory dwelling unit stands a much greater chance of qualification. Legal rental units provide a legitimate source of qualifying income on a standard loan application, thus opening the range of potential buyers. The twofold effect, of course, is that a renter has also been accommodated in a city that could be proximal to their job. All levels of government are being forced to explore density as the logical answer to managed growth. Progressive municipalities offer density bonuses and less onerous parking and setback requirements in an effort to reward developers for affordable housing units. Centralizing communities and creating an urbanized environment is a more cost-effective approach and reduces the waste that comes with sprawl. Now, how does that ideal of increased density fit into the footprint of Venice? Well, here's the good news. Venice is uniquely urbanized already. Small lots have been creatively designed to house varied architectural styles, both modern and traditional in feel. We live in close range of each other, and there's an understanding that we will be proximal to our neighbor, but we are also part of an inclusive neighborhood. The various catchments in Venice and the nicknames they've been given just further illustrate the pride we have for our neighborhoods. Taking a crash course in modern urban planning has now become your task, commissioners. Even as a layperson on the topic, I can assure you that nowhere in the tutorial on sensible community growth will you find a chapter on preserving post-war, cheap and cheerful builds as the best means to accommodate a growing populace. This kitsch ideal is only for those who would like time to stand still so memories can be preserved in a vacuum. Keep in mind that this ideal couldn't be maintained even if we wanted to. The toothpaste is out of the tube, and beachside bungalows have become a version of entry-level luxury living in Venice. These aren't homes for those in need of affordable rental housing, and this is the new paradigm, whether we like it or not. With the exception of some iconic craftsman builds and some notable designs from celebrated architects, the vast majority of Venice bungalows were cost-effective developments built to house vacationing seasiders and the working class. A small faction of activists would have you believe that greater than one-story builds will cause Venice to be shrouded in darkness, and we will all be gasping for air that will apparently stop circulating. What they fail to mention is that we currently have height restrictions and setback guidelines for each unique catchment of Venice that ensure we do not become a towering community. My own 900-square-foot home is a patchwork quilt of renovation DIYs that have taken place since 1948. Unless I am to add square footage and render it a useful family home, the value remains strictly in the land. This lot's highest and best use would be a 4-bedroom home with an accessory dwelling unit. This would require leaving the current square footage allowances alone. If we are to encourage the growth of a family-oriented community, inclusive of homeowners and renters, we must not consider downsizing square footage. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Casserly, followed by Dario Rodman Alvarez. And I heard one of the speakers ceded time.
Dario ceded one of his minutes.
You'll have 3 minutes.
Actually, Dario's not here. He had to leave for work. So he has this written thing. Can I read it or not later?
No, you can submit it for the record, but if you want to go ahead and use your 3 minutes now, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. And thank you guys for sticking around for public comment. With all due respect to the Commission and its good work, the conversation about Venice that has been evolving in front of the Commission, a conversation that has grown by degrees ever more divorced from the realities of the social fabric and built environment of our community, has reached its absurd apex in the current discussion centered around small single-story homes in Venice. Venice has always been a diverse and eclectic community defined by its diversity of housing stock that has made the diversity of our population possible. 1/3 of the houses in Venice are modernist contemporary homes. Contemporary architecture in Venice really exploded about 40 years ago. That's been the most important period of building in Venice's history, and that's what Venice is famous for. Another third of our housing is multi-unit housing, apartment buildings, and not small ones, often 6 to 8 units on 5,000 square foot lots. The remainder of our housing is pre-1950. Many of those structures are larger than 2 and sometimes 3 stories. Some are single-story small structures. A radically revisionist, fabricated vision of our intense, vital urban community, a vision wherein blinders are put on to filter out 99% of our community, and replace it with the fantasy of Venice as a quaint, small Carmel by the Sea beach town where people live in little cottages and, I don't know what, have tea with each other. A vision that is patently and utterly absurd. In larger context, it is important to remember that the same forces forwarding this fabricated, cartoonish reimagination of Venice are some of the same faces that behind the 1980s downzoning of Venice. That downzoning, while not altogether unintentional or malicious, was undeniably motivated by the desire to eliminate the possibility of building any more HUD low-income housing in the neighborhood. That move to downzone was exactly as classist, racist, and exclusionary as it sounds. That downzoning also eliminated the possibility for building any more affordable market rate apartment units which were common in our area up to that point. Now, incredibly, these same people are going after single-family homes. Whereas the Venice Pacific Plan is predicated on the fundamental principle that at a minimum, family homes should be allowed in single-family neighborhoods, homes which in an urban area such as Venice, where the average lot size is 2,700 square feet, 2 stories with nominal setbacks is the minimum necessary for a functional single-family home. These people are lobbying for twisted regulatory interpretations that would void the fundamental components of the Venice Pacific Plan and make single-family homes impossible on many of the single-family lots in our single-family neighborhood. Thank you.